I'm your host, the HD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the African podcast and all the other content on the channel, including our main podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. Follow us on social media. I'm at PSP on Twitter, Pitchsidepod on Instagram, and help us, of course, on the way to reach our first K on the channel. And we are nearing our 100th episode of the podcast, so your support matters. Join us for more. You are welcome. And we kick things off talking about the fourth round of the CAF Champions League for 2021. And we kick things off, of course, chronologically. We follow the order group by group, and we start from Group A, of course, the group involving the champions Al-Ahly, who finds themselves in a very precarious situation, facing Vita Club, of course, on Tuesday. All the games are going to be played on Tuesday, by the way, which is a first pretty much, because, the disruptions happening in the first fixture, then the second fixture, the couple of mismatches because of COVID situations and travel restrictions and what have you. But now I think at least the fourth round is going to be played fully in one day, and it's going to be really, it's going to be good for a change. Kick things off from Simba in Tanzania, hosting Al-Ahly. Of course, it's going to be an interesting game for Simba, top in the group with 7 points ahead of this game. They had a decent encounter with Al-Ahly away from home. They managed to keep a clean sheet. Going away to Al-Ahly and keeping clean sheet in Sudan is pretty interesting for them. They're going to be playing in front of not exactly a packed house or a full house in Tanzania, but it's pretty much going to be that situation, considering that they played against 30,000 in the last game against Al-Ahly there. So probably going to be interesting to see how the crowd is going to affect this one. Overall, it's interesting to see how Simba are going to be carrying on this game. Obviously, they were on the back foot, quite frankly, in the last game against Al-Ahly. They didn't exactly win, didn't exactly go for it, but I think that's could be understandable, really, because Al-Ahly were the ones desperate and in need of the points in that game after 2 losses, and then the third game they were looking for the first 3 points to try and get some sort of momentum going and try to be as close as possible to the qualification process. But I don't think they will be there, and certainly when they couldn't do it at home, I don't really give them a lot of chance of doing it away in Tanzania, and potentially in front of 30,000 people at least in the stadium. It looks an unsurmountable task, really, to expect from those kind of the players from Al-Ahly, who I mean, the 2 losses, particularly I think the one against Vita Club in the second round, was pretty demoralizing. The fact and the way in which it happened, of course, Al-Ahly going forward 1-0, going ahead, and then Vita Club turning things around and scoring 4 past them with such bad defensive performance that you don't really, associate. I mean, both games that they lost this season in the Champions League, both were, similar in form. So it's a collapse. They start good in the first half, but they collapse in the second, and, probably they're set for a loss here against Simba. A side that is well drilled. They play the 4-4-2 to a T. Again, as I mentioned in the Al-Ahly game in the second round, they play the simplistic of touches when it comes to football. They don't try to make it complex, and they have also the ability, as mild as it may be, to just break down the team, go into spaces, and go behind the defenders and do whatever they can do, really, to trouble the Sudanese side. It's going to be a tough game for Al-Ahly. They will try to get a point, they'll try to get anything going. If they could manage a victory away from home, that is going to be glorious, because it's going to help them a lot depending on the other game. But, I can see Simba really putting on another solid performance, and I really fancy them to win this one and go 10 points on top, and that would be quite the surprise. I mean, by that token, I think it's going to be impossible, because they still have Vita Club at home, and they're going to be only facing Al-Ahly away, and you can imagine that they're going to be winning against Vita Club at home as well, or getting at least a point, if they could still play with a packed house there, and go into Al-Ahly in a game that is going to be, by the time it happens, is going to be probably formalities if they manage to win against Al-Ahly today. I really fancy, on Tuesday, really, I really fancy them to win. Speaking of Al-Ahly, the champions, and again, as I mentioned earlier, they're in a precarious position pretty much in this group. They are 4 points at third place, joint second, if you want to count it in another way, with Vita Club. But, the first game was weird enough for Al-Ahly. They made all sorts of chances. They hit the post. They shot from outside the box, from inside the box, headers, tap-ins, missing, whatever situation you want to. It happened in the first game against Vita Club, but they couldn't score. But that just few fleeting moments of lack of concentration, the few lapses of concentration that they had in the game, they lost 2 goals, or they conceded 2 goals, and they lost 2 points because of that. And it could go even worse against a side like Vita Club. Again, they defend really well for a side that plays a 4-4-2, and they also attack really well. I mean, they could bounce on spaces behind your fullbacks, and that was apparent in the game against Simba. It was apparent again in the game against Vita Club. Obviously, from the left-hand side as well, with no Ali Malouli, it's not exactly going to be the same side without that kind of player on the left wing, providing them with the width, providing them with the depth, the crosses, the options. Also, trying to pin the opposition's right back into their defence when you have a left back like that who goes forward, who runs forward, who puts a lot of pressure on the defence of the opponents. I mean, you didn't have that against Vita Club. Certainly the moments where you get caught, you truly get caught with 2 goals. Now, Vita Club, I think they will try and take the game to a draw. I mean, that would be a pretty interesting scenario, try to take the game to a draw. They're still pretty much in the qualification process. They're still involved, really. It's a tussle between them and Al-Ahly for second place. And I really don't see Al-Ahly not going through. I mean, it's going to be mental if they don't do it, considering that they're champions of the last edition. It could still happen that they won't go through. But this game, I think, it depends a lot on the result between Al-Merrikh and Simba, because that is going to give one of them the chance to go through. And I mean, thankfully both games are played at the same time, so there's not going to be any kind of conspiracy. But Al-Ahly are in a precarious position. They could go to Vita Club and lose some more points in this competition, and that is going to be really, really bad, and this is going to feel really, really bad for Al-Ahly. Again, they didn't quite find themselves in the first 2 games, in the last 2 games or so after the game against Al-Merrikh. And again, that was down mostly to Al-Merrikh collapsing in the second half rather than Al-Ahly being actually, so strong at this moment. 7 points for Simba, 4 for Vita Club, 4 for Al-Ahly, and Al-Merrikh with 1 point. Again, it's an interesting really situation to see how the champions are going to be panning out against Vita Club away from home. To Group B, and the group of Al-Hilal, Omdurman, Wydad, Mamelodi Sundowns, and TP Mazembe. And it's a reverse fixture, of course, for Al-Hilal Omdurman against Wydad after the draw in the first fixture in Algeria, draw in which the home team, which is CR Wydad, were the better side, definitely. The poor start they had in the first 10 minutes caused them to concede a goal early on. They managed to equalise. They couldn't manage to score a second goal to keep themselves, going to ahead with some sort of momentum heading into this fixture. Obviously, they are joined on points with Al-Hilal Omdurman and TP Mazembe, in fact, on 2 points, the 3 of them, so it's pretty much an open sort of field behind Mamelodi Sundowns to who's going to be going through from this group. It's going to be interesting to see how Wydad are going to go about this game. Will they cave in like they did against Mazembe away from home, and also they did against Mamelodi Sundowns, pretty much not to try to expose themselves to the counters, or they're going to go all out, guns blazing against Al-Hilal away from home, trying to get things going for them. Try to get 3 points, really the first 3 points, and they're really in a bad situation also when it comes to goal difference, which is, I think, a defining sort of factor when it comes to the qualification as well as the head-to-head. So they will definitely want to score goals, win the game, but definitely the clean sheet is probably going to be a priority. They will try and secure it as much as they can, although judging on the first 3 games, it really sounds like an impossible task, really, particularly the last 2 ones against Mamelodi Sundowns, and in particular against Al-Hilal Omdurman, and in particular against Mamelodi Sundowns in the second match where they lost 5-1. It was pretty embarrassing loss, really, for them. Speaking of Mamelodi Sundowns, it's the reverse fixture for them against TP Mazembe, and after, of course, defeating them in Congo 2-1, managing an important victory in Congo 2-1, breaking an 80-match record undefeated streak for TP Mazembe there in the African competitions. TP Mazembe started to enter this group on top of it, head of the group, one of the favourites to win, are seriously in a big threat of being eliminated. And if they lose this game, and if they draw this game or lose this game against Mamelodi Sundowns, that is for sure, it has to be, I think, the end, because I really don't fancy them against Wydad away from home in Algeria. In the last fixture, certainly Al-Ahly Omdurman are going to be trying and bouncing on them. They've really been a curious case, Mazembe, this season. Very slower than usual, I think. Not that dynamic, not that dangerous on the attack. They don't feel like the presence that they used to be in the last couple of years in this competition, last decade pretty much in this competition. They were a force to be reckoned with, and you can only really eliminate them when you get, points or wins at your home. You cannot really go to Congo, Lubumbashi and say, oh, I'm going to be winning against Mazembe. So it almost seems like an impossible task before Mamelodi Sundowns went there and did it. Obviously, the fact that there is no crowd helped a lot in this, but definitely it's a curious case for the Congolese Giants, who are again one of the favourites, but definitely not this season. The loss against Mamelodi Sundowns 2-1 at home, probably is going to feel really bad, and felt really bad for sure. And another loss again away from home is going to feel even worse, because they will know that again they're going to be closer to elimination. And if definitely Al-Ahly Omdurman Wydad, the winner of that game, probably will be the closest to get through. I mean, there's still 2 rounds to be played aside from this round, but definitely is going to go a big step towards qualification. Whoever wins from Al-Ahly Omdurman and CR Belouizdad. But for TP Mazembe, it is definitely life or die. I mean, if you couldn't bring the points from your home, you really cannot bring them away from home to a side like Mamelodi Sundowns. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to expose themselves to them. They're going to break you on the counter, and they're going to completely smash you like they did to both Al-Ahly Omdurman and to Wydad, beating them 5-1, mostly exposing the defense of the Algerian club. So definitely it's going to be interesting to see how another favorite in this competition, Mazembe, are going to be faring out in this fixture. I mean, it's really intriguing now. It's an intriguing situation actually growing on in that Group B. Mamelodi Sundowns, of course, 9 points, and 2 points for Al-Ahly Omdurman, Belouizdad and TP Mazembe, all of them on 2 points before this round. We cannot say the same really about Group C. We cannot say that there is an intriguing situation in Group C, really. I mean, despite the fact that, they are quite similar in a lot of situations, that Wydad Casablanca, the top of the group, are pretty much running away with the lead with 9 points, 7 goals, no goals conceded. One of the strongest performers in this competition, if not the best side, I think, performing in this competition overall. But definitely, at least, it's not an open field behind them. It's pretty simple. It's either Horoya or Kaizer Chiefs, and those two sides are going to be facing each other in the next round. Hopefully, in round 5 of this competition is going to be, Kaizer Chiefs hosting Wydad, and it's going to be Horoya traveling to face Atletico Petroleos, who are the hapless side of the group, the basket of the group, really. And when you consider that they are the only side in the bottom of the table of the 4 groups that has no points, you really can see how desperate they are to do any kind of significant stuff in this round when they host Kaizer Chiefs. The first game between those two sides ended in 2-0 for the South African side, so I'm looking forward for more of the same, really, of this encounter. Again, when you have such a desperate side like Kaizer Chiefs, like Petro Luanda, playing in that group, losing to whomever and whenever, and losing to everyone and anyone, you don't really fancy them to get even a point against Kaizer Chiefs, albeit in their own home, but they lost at home to Horoya Conakry, so it's not exactly the biggest of surprises if it happens. Speaking of Horoya, they of course host Wydad Athletic Club in Guinea at the first game between those two sides, of course, ending for Wydad Casablanca with a 2-0 victory. Interesting situation for the two sides. Wydad Casablanca, of course, I think they should be able to make the turnover. Obviously, they're not going to be letting down their guard too much, because they know that they don't. They're probably going for the record at the moment. They're going for the perfect record, maybe. They will try and finish the group with as much points as they can, and certainly finishing top of the group gives you a little bit of advantage in the quarterfinal of the competition against a side like Horoya, who will relish the chance of maybe a little bit of a, sort of complacent maybe with that Casablanca side. Maybe they will be complacent, but I don't think that their coach Fawzi Benzarti would let that happen. He's not complacent at all, and he doesn't let complacency creeps into his sides, so I don't really expect that from him, but certainly the players might be in a bit of a sort of, complacent mental state after those 3 victories. Qualification pretty much secured and locked, top of the group maybe, so it's going to be all about that competition behind them between Horoya and Kaiser Chiefs for who's going to be joining them in the quarterfinal, but that doesn't distract from the fact that this game is going to be hard in itself for Wydad Casablanca. We'll see how they fare. We saw them against Petro Luanda in the first game. They had a hard time, pretty much they had a really hard time against Petro Luanda, despite the fact that they won. It was a pretty rough game. They missed a penalty and they managed only to score late on in the second half, so it's a pretty interesting situation brewing on for the Moroccan Giants. Again, one of the favourites, and in my opinion, really the best side performing in this competition overall. Finally, of course, my favourite group in this competition, Group D, and MC Alger faced Tungit in Algiers, of course. In that group, while Zamalek host Esperance de Tunis. The first game between MC Algiers and Tungit was, pretty one-sided really for the Senegalese side. They were the better side, but definitely couldn't make up for it. They couldn't score. MC Algiers scored the early goal and then caved in at the back, and they just defended really well for the rest of the 90 minutes. And against a side in Tungit that weren't exactly effective, they weren't going forward. They didn't look like scoring at any point of the game, despite the possession that they have, despite the number of shots that they have, but never looked quite threatening. They only had a big chance hitting the post late on in the second half, where they could have salvaged a point. But definitely, I think if you're going to count it as possession and domination in the game, they certainly deserve to win. Maybe not just to get a draw, but in terms of managing the game, it was pretty wrong. And MC Alger went on with a plan. They had a decent plan. They defended really well. They sat deep. As they did in all of their games, to be fair. They did in the 3 games, they did sit deep. They try pinch and score early and sit deep and play, sort of a squeezed line in the middle, not letting spaces enough behind them. It worked in the first game, it worked in the second game to an extent against Esperance. They kept the draw, and it worked to perfection, I think, in the third game against Tungit, winning away from home before a game in Algiers. That definitely would be interesting for the Algerian side, of course, to seal probably the qualification, to seal their situation in the group, and to get even closer, I think, to a qualification in their group. They are, of course, 5 points behind Esperance Tunis, which transitioned just swiftly to the game between Zamalek and Esperance in Egypt in the reverse fixture. And the first leg was, I think, revenge achieved, I think, for Esperance with a 3-1 victory over the Egyptian side. It was really, really interesting to see, Esperance playing that way, trying to counter the way that Zamalek played to them last season, sitting back deep, starting on the defensive pretty much, starting on the back foot, and then managing the game from that point onward, trying to pick Zamalek apart smartly, trying to, choose wisely the moments where they are picking their opponents apart. It was worrying for the first 25 minutes and 30 minutes, but once the goal came in, and even after the equaliser for Zamalek, you knew that the game had a certain tempo, had a certain system about it from Esperance, who, were pretty average in the first half, but I think the second half in particular was pretty dominant performance for them. Now in the second game, Zamalek, I think, are going to be the ones demanded really to go for it, because they don't have any other solution but to go for it. They are pretty much, they are right above Tengiz. They are 2 points at third in the group, and they need this game. They need a win, not just a draw. They need a win to go through to the next round, because depending on the other result, if MC Algiers manage to defeat Tungit, which is very likely really, Zamalek have a big chance of going completely crashing out of this competition, and that wouldn't be very lovely, would it be, for the Egyptian side, the runners-up of the competition last season, who really looked good in the competition last season. I mean, yes, they didn't start strong in the group stages and all of that, but definitely carried a lot of momentum once they got past that point. So in my opinion, this is a game that is all about how Esperance are going to be approaching it versus Zamalek are going to be trying to start strong, start on the front foot, maybe score an early goal, try and control the game and put it under their control as much as they can, and we'll see how things pan out if Zamalek are going to be able to, pay the favours and pay the debts back from the first fixture in Tunis. That's it from me for this episode of the African Podcast, the Champions League Road. I was your boy, the HD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these podcasts, and the main one, which you can listen to both on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform. Help us on the way to our first K, and always support us to produce more episodes of this content. Follow us on social media as PSP on Twitter, Pitchsidepod on Instagram, and until next time, I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye.